All right, ladies and gentlemen, our next segment is a use case session on the topic, Daring to Take the Leap, Cracking the Success Code. The session will delve into interesting case studies of some of the companies that cut across sizes and location who successfully set up their GCC centers in India to accelerate their transformation into technology and data-driven businesses. Our speakers for the session are Janis, Leigh, EVP and Chief People Officer, Giant Eagle. She's a seasoned leader with exceptional experience across all facets of human resources, strategy, and development on a global scale. Our next speaker is Leila Pourhashemi, CIO and VP, Technology Business Operations, Blackhawk Network. Leila leverages her role to spur enterprise-wide transformation in Blackhawk's technology applications. And chairing this session will be Lalit Ahuja, founder and CEO of ANSR. Lalit has been instrumental in establishing over 60 GCCs across India and Poland. And prior to founding the company, Lalit has served as the CEO of several companies, including Datamatics, LG, and News Corporation, Star TV. Pleasure to have you all with us this afternoon. Lalit, the floor is all yours. Over to you.
Thank you, Justin. This session brings experiences of industry leaders from two interesting companies that have dared to take the leap, beating convention and charting their own road. These companies have cut across the size myth at their GCCs that have been set up to build strategic capacity and support companies' transformation agenda. In the process, their GCC-powered companies are accelerating their transformation into technology and data-driven businesses. We'll begin with a brief introduction to the panel. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce my fellow panelists and two tall industry stalwarts. Janis, Leigh, EVP and Chief People Officer at Giant Eagle, and Leila Pourhashemi, CIO and Vice President, Technology Business Operations, Blackhawk Network. Janis and Leila, tell us about one fun fact that is not widely or publicly known. Any one of you can go first.
Leila, do you want to go first?
Why don't you go first?
Well, I don't know if mine's a fun fact. Recently, we have, my husband and I have really taken on hiking. And so we love the mix of hiking with travel. So we, just before the pandemic, we were in Cape Town and we hiked Table Mountain. And one would think South Africa, so it would be a great hike. We hit the one day where it was windy, rainy, and cloud had descended on the mountain, so quite the challenge. But other hikes that we have done recently, we live north of Montreal in an area called Mont Tremblant, so lots of great Canadian wilderness. And we're heading to Scotland in 2 weeks to hike the north of Scotland at John O'Groats and the Orkney Islands. So looking forward to that. So that's a little bit of what we're up to right now.
That's fun.
That's great. Well, nothing that exciting. So my fun fact is actually very early in my career. I had the chance to work on a custom font for the CIA. And back then, you know, in my early 20s, I thought it would be kind of fun to make some jokes, you know, and so I asked this very proper gentleman, there was no video back then, is that the Culinary Institute of America? And he turned around and said, no, ma'am, it's the Central Intelligence Agency.
That is so fun.
Yeah. Which for those watching, it's the Secret Service of the United States. And I said, well, I'm not a US citizen yet. And they're like, it's all right, ma'am, we just need a font. And so they essentially made us design strange characters and encode them onto a normal keyboard. So when you type the normal letters, you'd get something different. And that's what I was working on. And I had no idea what they did with it.
Wow.
That's very interesting. Much more interesting than my hiking.
So moving on, Janis, what are your thoughts on the importance of a growth mindset as a key enabler for an organization?
Yeah, I absolutely. You know, it's interesting. In the organization that I recently came from, and also in joining Giant Eagle, which I've only just joined earlier this year, Introducing growth mindset to the organization, I feel, is just critical and a key enabler. It needs to become part of the DNA of who we are, because when you have a growth mindset, you're constantly challenging yourself and making sure that you're learning and you're growing. But more importantly, you're learning from your mistakes, from your failures, and you're taking a step back and understanding how you're going to overcome something, take on a challenge. And I think that just becomes the enabler as an organization. If you have everybody who has that type of mindset, that test and learn, the ultimate test and learn, and taking on challenges, that just can't help but lead to success. And that's really why growth mindset is important to the organization.
Thank you, Janis. This is truly insightful. And now to you, Leila, what would be your advice for women aspiring careers in technology on the other side of this pandemic?
Well, I think on the other side of this pandemic is actually probably quite similar than during and before the pandemic, as far as being a woman in technology is concerned. I'd make two key points. I think the first is ask for what you want. Research has shown that if a man feels 60% qualified for a job, they're going to go for it. Janis probably knows this in her line of work. But a woman has to feel 100% confident, and even then she may not apply or she may not ask. And so the first thing is just ask for what you want. The next thing is try contrasting your styles to get to the desired outcome, because sometimes you want to be assertive and sort of forthright, and sometimes you want to be calm and kind of concentrate on making business relationships and try to get to a better path. And what's really important is both of these demonstrate confidence and a drive for results, and it's up to you to choose the right one at the right time to get the outcome you want.
Thank you, Leila, for this inspiring advice. And now moving on with this session, back to Janis. We are in the middle of an intense war for GCC talent in India, as you're aware. What GCC should be doing to attract and retain the best talent?
Yeah, and is it ever a war for talent? And I think we all have our challenges right now as we look to fill out our teams in our GCCs, our respective GCCs. I think that when we look at the candidates who we come forward, who we talk to, what's really key is that we're really listening to those candidates on where they feel they're at in their career journey right now and what they're looking for growth and what they want to achieve, and helping connect the dots on why joining a smaller GCC could be the right decision for them. And when I think about joining a smaller GCC, what I think about is, especially if the GCC is in the stage of developing and growing and just getting established, is you get to be a culture builder, not necessarily integrating into a culture. You get to be part of what that culture is going to be in that GCC. And I think that is really attractive to people, especially when I look at the strength of culture in the different GCCs. It's really something that's critical and something that's commendable when I think about my experiences with teams in Bangalore. The other thing I think about in a smaller GCC is there's less layers. And so that can be attractive for a candidate, because what it helps them do is perhaps work more closely with senior leaders, with leaders throughout the globe. It also allows them to work on a breadth of projects when you have a smaller group, and that can be attractive too. And then more so from a smaller GCC, quite often if it's establishing, you have an organization that's trying to understand, how do you set up the new processes? Where do you find the innovation? And by joining a smaller GCC, you really get to be part of that and really get to become that problem solver. So those are the things that I think you would want to highlight, or that we highlight. But again, I can't say enough about listening to the candidate and really helping them connect the dots.
Thank you, Janis, and all this makes perfect sense. Back to you, Leila. How is your team in India accelerating the transformation of Blackhawk network?
Well, thank you for that. We have an incredible team in India, which I have to say, 2 years ago today, we had no team in India. So this has been a very quick journey for us. And it's also been primarily unplanned, of course, but during the pandemic. So we hired our center head there in October of 2019. quite fortuitous when you consider what was about to happen to the world. So one of our key points is that we have 5 what we call strategic development centers around the world, and they're all treated equally. And that's a really, really important point for us as we've sort of been on this journey. So we have 3 centers in the United States, 1 in the United Kingdom, and 1 in Bangalore. And we call them our SDC, Strategic Development Centers, and we just refer to them by the city they're in. So making it on an equal footing has been really critical for us, and giving us the ability to lead and drive critical work in every single one of them, and for them to partner across the world with each other. We've had incredible talent in our Bangalore Strategic Development Center, and they work on all of our product areas. They lead some, they contribute to some, but they work on all of our different product areas. And the key areas that they actually lead for us there are mobile, data, and digital payments. One fun fact, Janis has recently joined her company, and her company and mine have been partners, and they've been a customer of ours for many years now. And as just an example of the partnership, it was about a year ago, we took over the gift card section of giantseagle.com. And the team that does that is actually out of Bangalore. And they work seamlessly with our teams in the United States and our sales folks and Janis's company's teams around the world, right? And so we really try to blend the lines and make sure that every team member, including our development center in Bangalore, is a valued member of our company.
Thank you, Leila. We knew the word was a small village, and all this sounds, really promising. Now, I'm going to have a quick round, rapid fire, rather, short answer questions. And I'm going to start with Janis. Janis, would you find best global talent by taking work to wherever talent is, or would you bring talent to one central location, and why?
Wow, so I would absolutely say you take the work to the talent, the global talent. I really believe in casting your net far to find great talent throughout the globe. And what that brings is just great diversity of thought, which really helps an organization when you think about, I love what you refer to the strategic centers, Leila, because I think that just makes sense. You have that diversity, you have the talent across the globe. It creates a different dynamic in problem solving and just what teams can produce.
Thank you. And the next one is remote work and the gig economy, passing fads or here to stay?
I would say that definitely not a passing fad. I think that we're interesting at Giant Eagle, in particular in North America. We have declared we will be full-time remote. We are not going back to the office. We're still trying to understand what that looks like for our GCC in Bangalore, but we'll solve for it from a local perspective. But I would say just remote in general. I think there's going to always be now a hybrid. I don't think necessarily that people can go back. There's too much, I think, that people have appreciated about working remote. And so each company, I think, each organization is going to find their new normal and what makes sense for them. And ultimately, I either think some organizations will stay fully remote and some will find some kind of a hybrid if the role allows for it and if the organization can operate accordingly. So that's what I feel about that. And for the gig, yeah, absolutely. I think that especially when you look at organizations, different times of where they're evolving as an organization, where they are in their growth journey, I think that gig is here, and I think it'll further evolve as well.
Thank you, Janis. Very interesting thoughts. And back to you, Leila. The first one is crack teams or large teams to accelerate your company's transformation agenda, and why?
Well, thank you, Lalit. I would say the former. At Blackhawk, we have something we call our well-formed teams. And well-formed teams are typically 5 to 9 people. In Agile speak, it's called a 2-pizza team because it takes 2 pizzas to feed the team and no more than that. So 5 to 9 people. They include, engineers, software engineers, test engineers, product owner embedded in there. And we keep the team small. We keep them attached to an area of our product, and we label them to iterate. And that's really the key to our agility. However, there's always big bodies of work to be done. So the key to that is to enable the team of teams to work together, and that could be around the world. So a team is small, and well, these days co-location is time zone, not necessarily a building, but the team of teams can be global, and we flow the work to the most capable team, and they're sort of loosely coupled and highly aligned around the globe, and that's been the key to our success here.
Thank you, Leila and Janis. And there's one more question for you, Leila. Entrepreneurship or startup engagements, the best way to scale innovation at Blackhawk Network?
Well, this is what's interesting, is that innovation's been a core value of Blackhawk for many, many, many years. And we've recently built on that history that we've had. We think it works best when it's part of how you get your work done every day. You can't say on Tuesday mornings, I'm going to innovate, and the rest of the week, I get to do the boring stuff, right? It doesn't work like that. It happens when it happens, and it should happen every day. And so we unleash innovation through a lot of focus on test and learn and iteration, and finding learnings and everything. I think Janis said this earlier, learning from mistakes. It's not a mistake in my mind if there's a learning from it. Right. And so you can learn, things work or things don't work, but in both cases, you've actually learned. And that's sort of how you unleash the power of innovation every day. And it's really important for us to work with like-minded customers that have a similar point of view, because then we're actually able to iterate and work together. I'll use another example from the mutual work that our companies have done together and actually announced recently is there's a partnership between PayPal, Giant Eagle, and Blackhawk that was announced earlier in August. And this is an idea of, that's been around for a long time. How do you enable digital payments in a retail environment, right? In a brick and mortar store. And this is something that we were able to bring to fruition between our companies, because we all have an innovative mindset. And, I've been part of so many technology companies in my career, and the innovation has to also be at the right time for the environment, for the customers. And, I'll give you a very old example. About 25 years ago, I worked at a company that had developed a video streaming technology. And we actually killed it because there wasn't enough bandwidth going to consumers in their homes to enable it to work. And now, you couldn't live without it. Our kids couldn't live without it, but it has to be at the right time as well. And so when you have the right time, when you have the right partnerships, magic will happen.
No, absolutely. And thank you again. You guys did really well in this round. Just one question, and maybe either one of you could answer. How are you guys looking at bringing your GCCs together, or bringing the partnership, that has been set up in the home office, back to Bangalore?
Well, Janis, did you want to start?
If you could clarify, Lalit, you're talking about as we bring the offices back in? Is that?
I was talking about the partnership around, the products on the payment side, digital payments back in the US. Are you also looking at your GCCs working in tandem, partnering with each other to, give you capacity and whatever you need to accelerate that partnership?
Well, I think that would be an interesting outcome of this conversation, wouldn't it?
I think so.
I'll be honest, I actually didn't know that Giant Eagle had a location in India prior to getting ready for this talk. So this could be the beginning of an amazing thing.
We should connect for sure, but absolutely, because if I think about our strategy and the teams that we're building in Bangalore, we have teams from basically across the organization that are starting to stand up, I actually think, Leila, I'm pretty sure there's something to do with payments. We should talk.
Sounds wonderful. It started here.
Absolutely. And now I want to move to the final part of our discussion. And again, this question goes back to Janis. Janis, you've been a GCC veteran and you've excelled at transforming your companies into collaborative, globally distributed teams. Based on your prior GCC experience, how are you looking at executing Giant Eagle's GCC strategy differently?
Wow, I wouldn't have thought of myself as a veteran, but it definitely had a great experience previously with my previous company in establishing our GCC, and there was lots of learnings. I think about, when we previously, with my previous company, Hudson Bay Company, when we went into establishing the GCC, we were really just thinking finance operations and technology. And it took us a year or two to kind of think about what other things we could bring over and start to establish teams. When I think about Giant Eagle and the journey that we're on, so we're a year in, we just hit 100 employees a few weeks ago. I think that with myself and with some of the other leaders that are on the team, because of our GCC experience, I think that we are, from a strategy perspective, bringing more capability in quickly into Bangalore. So nothing is off the table as far as the teams that we can stand up, the way that they work. I love the hybrid model where you have teams that are split between North America and India, and they're working together. The one thing I would say too, from a strategy perspective that makes this really interesting this time around, I'll say, is that the technology. We are now a world on Zoom or Teams meetings. It creates this, equal playing field when everybody's on the screen. You don't necessarily have one group in one office and one group in the other. And that can create for just, a great environment where everybody has a voice. And with the right leader who can really lead globally dispersed teams, I think that's just, it will bring great success. So that's what I would think about from a strategy differently, just more capability quicker and really building out the hybrid teams.
Thank you, Janis. And Leila, you have an impeccable reputation for getting things done, contextually empowering your teams, reducing organizational complexity, enabling teams to scale innovation more efficiently. What are you doing differently at Blackhawk in India to execute even better?
Well, fundamentally, I believe in scaling innovation through disciplined execution. That's really how it happens. It happens every day, as we spoke earlier. At Blackhawk, I guess it was part luck and part planning, but you couldn't have planned the pandemic. But we embarked on 2 large change programs towards the end of 2019. And the first was actually the decision and the opening of our strategic development center in Bangalore. We actually did that in November 2019. I don't want to think if we hadn't done it then, would we have ever been able to do it? We don't know, right? Because we had a big opening ceremony and on an auspicious day, and it was absolutely wonderful. And then, we did a round of media interviews, and we talked about how we're going to hire over 200 people. With the Times of India in January of 2020, which is actually my last trip there. As it turned out, we thought we'd be back pretty quickly, but we've done amazing. We surpassed that goal earlier this year. So actually, I would say on schedule, despite 95% of our people having been hired, during a pandemic, and they've never been together in the same place. They've been together on Zoom, as Janis said, and so. We've really focused on talent, bringing an incredible set of leaders in, and the leaders then can hire their teams. And that's been a big part of our change journey there. We also have a mix of backgrounds and experiences from freshers straight out of university to very seasoned payments veterans. And again, I think Janis pointed to this earlier as well, but diversity of thought, skills, and experiences leads to better outcomes. And so that applies to levels of seniority. It applies to people around the world who've worked at different companies and can bring the best of that experience together. And so that was really kind of the first part of our change. The second part of our change was something we call our Agile Evolution, which we launched in February of 2020. Again, the company had had innovation as its core values for many, many, many years. And but we built on that. We called it our Agile Evolution because it was an evolution from where we had been. And this enabled us to scale at the team of teams level around the world. And these two changes went hand in hand, because when you are in a large office, you can count on being in the right hallway at the right time to hear about the right thing and kind of get involved. That's not possible when you have development centers around the world. And it's certainly not possible when we're not in the office. So these two worked very well together, and they've enabled us to do bodies of work around the world with teams contributing everywhere. And I would be remiss in not pointing out actually that during the pandemic, we've had a very strong global leadership team that has worked across all of the challenges that we've all faced, and even especially during that last surge that we experienced in India. The teams came together. They created a task force for dealing with the help that our employees needed. And the teams around the world jumped in and helped out in terms of ensuring that things recovered when our Bangalore team was unable to do so. And I think that is really at the heart of creating an amazing global team, is that they just naturally sort of self-organize and make things happen, no matter what is thrown at them. And that's been really the journey we're on. So I think those two went hand in hand, both the creation of our development center, as well as creating the ability to flow work to any team in any location, to allow them to collaborate with any other team in any other location. That's really been a huge unlock for us.
Thank you, Leila. And this question is for both of you. What is your one advice for companies and leaders daring to take the leap of building small global teams?
Do you want to go first, Leila?
Go ahead.
Okay. When I think about it and building a small GCC or just even starting with your GCC, quite often, and it can be frustrating, where people will often say, oh, you're really a GCC, that'll be for your transactional work. And I would say throw that out, because transactional work should be heading towards automation. What you need to look at your GCC for is you're gaining valued, a depth of talent, a unique talent that's at a global scale. And I talked about before about the diverse thinking and different perspective. And I think that's what you can gain from a GCC. It's really about value work and innovation that can come to your organization, and it either enhances what you already have, or perhaps it's a gap that you have that you need to find elsewhere. And that's how you need to think about a GCC and the advantage that it brings. And I'll hand it over to you, Leila.
All right. Well, I mentioned this, but you have to mention things 7 times. So I'm going to try and get in a couple more times. Diversity of thought, skills, and experiences leads to better outcomes. That applies for talent around the world. That applies for having a diversity of genders and all the other types of diversity that we value. And it brings different perspectives. And if you can create an environment that's healthy for a healthy debate and may the best ideas win, I think that leads to great outcomes. It's really also important to tap into talent globally. We have found, depending on our different locations, there's a different environment and different experiences that people have had in their prior roles. And it really helps us get back to that scaling that we talked about and scaling our innovation. And that's how we deliver amazing value to our customers. And so we'll continue to build on that. And I'm excited for what this new, there are good things that have come out of the pandemic. And I think Janis pointed out how it's really equalized. I mean, all 3 of us happen to be sitting in the United States right now, I think, but we didn't have to be.
Yeah.
Or actually, you're in Montreal. You're not. You're in
North
America. There you go. But we didn't have to be. We could be anywhere, and we could still be together here. And that's what's amazing.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Janis and Leila, for your most invaluable insights. The much talked about next normal is already here, as we know, and perhaps much sooner than we all anticipated. One of the important considerations of the next normal will be how all companies in a size and industry agnostic manner will look at their digital completeness to stay relevant, differentiated, and competitive in the post-pandemic era. This would require companies to reimagine their business models and reinvent their digital strategies, beginning with workforce strategies. And daring to take the leap with collaborative, globally distributed teams using the GCC model may just be a powerful way of accomplishing it. Thank you again, Janis and Leila, for an absolutely delightful session. I had a lot of takeaways, as I hope our audience did. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lalit, and our speakers, Janis and Leila, for that very interesting discussion and for your perspectives on daring to take the leap, cracking the success code.